Hi, this is Eli Kranzberg, and in this series, we're going to look at ways of modifying and enhancing the already great sounding and often overlooked factory library of sounds that ships with Kontakt. Among other things, we'll look at combining groups together from different instruments, setting up key switches to trigger them, fading them up using the mod wheel, exporting and reusing chains of insert effects, editing amp envelope parameters for different effects when blending sounds together, saving snapshots, and we'll even dig into the hidden power in the Urban Beats instruments. And then finally, we'll look at signal flow, both external and internal. We'll look at routing to individual outputs within your DAW, as well as setting up sends and buses within your Kontakt instrument and using effects at the group, bus, send, and output stages. I will, of course, be explaining what I'm doing as we go along throughout the videos, but I won't be covering all the basics from the ground up. So if you aren't already familiar with the inner workings of Kontakt, please check out the Kontakt Explained series here at Groove 3 to familiarize yourself with the basics. Before we jump in, let's do a quick review of the Kontakt instrument architecture. At its heart, Kontakt is a sample player, and samples begin their lives in the mapping editor. They can be imported or dragged in, and depending where we drop them in the vertical space, that'll determine how wide a range they'll take up. And once we drop it in, we can adjust the range either graphically or in these fields here. And the samples are hosted within a zone, and the zone parameters can be adjusted here, different velocity ranges, the root note, volume, panning, tuning, etc. In addition, we have a source module for each zone where we can adjust the tuning, the different sampler mode that it plays back in, reverse the samples, assign it to be a release trigger, different quality, etc. We can double-click a zone to take us into the wave editor where we can set up different loop points. If it's a long sample, we can slice it up. We can have different envelopes for the different zones, volume and pan, and we can turn on a grid if we want to slice it up and transform it in various ways. Now, once we have a collection of zones, they're put together in the group editor in groups. Right now we only have one zone and one group, but we can have multiple groups. And group start options indicate how they're going to start. For example, if they're going to be starting with a key switch or a controller or round robin, etc. We can insert effects on a per group basis over here. And there's an amplifier stage with separate volume and panning and phase inverting and swapping and channel routing and output routing for each individual group. The signal from the groups can then pass straight to the output, or they can be routed to instrument buses where we can group them together in buses and process them further with effects here. We can set up insert effects that will apply to the whole instrument. We can set up send effects so that we can send from any of these stages to another bank of insert effects. And finally, we have a sophisticated modulation section where we can modulate almost any of the parameters in any of the other modules. And then we have an output routing section if we want to route to multiple outputs or have the sends arrive at aux inputs. So the basic overview or big picture is that we have samples that are hosted in zones. Zones are collected into groups, and a collection of groups makes up an instrument. And of course, we can have multiple instruments within one multi. So if you need a refresher, take a look at Kontakt Explained, and we'll get started in the next video, and we'll begin looking at ways of modifying the factory content.